Welcome back. Welcome in. This is Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com, a CBS sports podcast. I am Mike Casazza, welcoming in from the transfer portal, Chris Anderson. Chris, you walked the wilderness. You had a look around, shook the trees. Some players fell out, but you made it out safely. Congratulations.
I appreciate it, Mike. I had to get out there and see what everybody had to offer. Check out all my options. Here I am, back, ready to go. That transfer portal is a tricky place. It's not. It's an ugly place. It's not a place you really want to go unless you have to.
Unless you're a Colorado Buffalo. You want to and you have to, I guess, right?
You want to talk about the jilted ex go not to go off too far on a tangent on that. I saw there was the lineman that committed to UCLA, and that was one of those guys that Dion was acting like yeah I didn't want that guy, and I was like, wait, are you sure? Because everyone else in the world wants him, so I don't know what you're talking about, but whatever, we'll see if it works. I mean, it's gonna. Honest to God, and this is nothing to do with Dion. This has nothing to do with Colorado. I hope it does not work because I don't want that to become, the blueprint for other programs to just evict 60 out of your 85 roster players and just bring in new guys every year.
There's no chance they're going to be good, right?
I don't see how, but I mean, they've been terrible. So it's like you're going to have some kind of bump. I mean, I can't imagine they were 1-11 last year, right? Like I can't imagine they're going to be that bad again, even with all new guys and new coaches.
I guess they bought the dip, so even if they go like 3-9, it's a 2-win improvement. And Dion can say it worked.
Yep.
I think
Talk about trajectory. I think he's in year -2. Is that right?
I can't confirm that. I'm not the person to ask about year 0 or anything, so keep me out of this one, please. I think what would concern me more about this roster shenanigans is hiring like this Pied Piper, so to speak. And maybe that undersells like how good he could or maybe even is as a coach, but getting somebody who is just going to be like a magnetic personality or figurehead, and it's just going to work the acquisitions, the portal, things like that, because that could be spectacularly awful too. I have no idea how it's going to work out for Dion. No idea. But like you could see a situation where someone else has a high profile, maybe knows a little bit about coaching, but it's just supposed to be this Pied Piper who's going to sing his song and everybody's going to come out to his school through the transfer portal or through recruiting. And maybe it doesn't work and you got like a 4-year disaster on your hand that's going to take at least as long to correct. Don't know. From the very beginning, this has been extremely attractive to me, like car crash quality. Maybe like F1, I guess. It could be fun and exciting, but it could be an absolute disaster too. So we'll see. Not the reason we're here. This is not a Colorado podcast, although people have been known to leave our nest for Colorado, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to West Virginia's transfer portal. The door closes. A 15-day window expires here on Sunday. Naturally, West Virginia loses maybe one of its more notable players to the portal on Monday. We can explain. But ins and outs, we have some numbers from combining the winter period, the spring period. We have some pluses, some minuses, I don't know. When it comes to West Virginia, the portal is always going to be active this year and last year, especially so on the way in to even out all the activity on the way out. But let's step back and let's figure out how this is going to look. How it looks right now, I just don't know how you can say that West Virginia is in a better spot just because the quality and the quantity of players they lost did not bring in the quality or quantity, I think, on par. But it's May 2nd. Who knows? Like we kind of like some of these additions, and maybe you have faith in the roster to kind of grassroots solve the problem. So maybe you don't need the transfers to be quite as good. And that's the sign of a healthy roster and a healthy program. We just don't know right now. So a lot of us is going to be projecting and saying that don't know, but I don't know if it's as good as what it was before. In fact, I think it isn't, but I do think there's ways for this team to certainly get on its feet and kind of make progress in some of the areas where they lost players And that's kind of the name of the game when it comes to transfer portal right now.
Yeah, I'm looking at the numbers. What I got? I got 18 players out, 18 scholarship players on the way out of the program. I have not updated the snaps. You'll see that stuff later this week about the number of snaps played. But there are some, I would say, significant names on there that are on their way out. And like you said, they've brought in some good players. Have they brought in guys that are the caliber of, let's say, Jordan Jefferson leaving? I don't know about that yet. I mean, we're both pretty high on Day Hawkins, but is he Jordan Jefferson? I'm not sure. We can go that far. Caden Prather, I talked about how things went so far south for him for the entire second half of the year, averaging like 25 yards a game or something, really, really kind of paltry like that. But he was still a very talented player, a still high upside guy. He's still young. So that was a loss, and you kind of go up and down the list. And well, that's why we're here, Mike, is to give our opinions of where things are right now. Because the good-ish news, I think, for West Virginia is that the names leaving should basically stop. Um, we talked about on Monday. I mean, like, purposefully, I think I even wrote the word foreshadowing in the middle of like the first paragraph. Um, that the portal departures were not done
Mm.
because of the 48-hour rule. Like, the players could let the schools know by Sunday at midnight that they were leaving, and the schools had until Tuesday at midnight to put the name in. It's 48 hours from whenever you let the school know. And then the second part of that was grad transfers. Anybody who has graduated can transfer at any time. They can enter the portal at any time. Those windows mean absolutely nothing to players who are being a grad transfer. And that includes, here in a couple weeks, or whenever, I guess, official graduation is, whenever you officially get your degree. I don't know when that qualifies, but anybody that graduates this spring. So it's not done, but for the most part, the departures from the West Virginia University football program should be finished, and the additions are still going. So that's good news.
All right, so let's circle this for a second. Grad transfers can leave, like Tony Mathis. A player can leave now, but would have to sit out. Correct?
Right.
That's not appealing to anybody. And then, I mean, that's the only ways right now. Whereas they can add a few more people. With Mathis leaving, they actually have another scholarship they can award. Are we in the last year of the counters being gone?
Yeah, this is so I would say this, you want to get to 85. Like, not no matter what, but pretty much no matter what. Because yeah, this is your opportunity to go above and beyond 25, however much you need to get to 85.
So where are they at now with that? Because that's a fluid number that I don't know.
We're at
I can
81 right now. So four open spots as of 9:45 on Tuesday morning.
and here's the cool thing. They're not going to replace the running back with a running back. So where they had like an embarrassment of riches, they can now spread that wealth to another position. What position do you think, I'm putting you on the spot here, when they get a running back scholarship where they don't need to go get a running back, where can they put that now that they might have been otherwise handcuffed?
I think linebacker, we've heard a lot of talk about defensive line. They've still been kind of poking around with defensive backs. But they've been linked to a couple of linebackers that are very interesting. And what was it before? Well, both sides here of the linebacker group here. The first being Bandit, with Antoine Powell Ryland coming up from Florida. He is, people have, sorry about the throat clearing there, everybody. But the people I've spoken with have said, oh, you can play all sorts of places. Watch his film, watch what position he plays. He is a bandit. And he's a bandit. He's a bandit. He's a bandit. He plays a position at Florida called Jack linebacker, which, as described, is a stand-up edge rushing linebacker that can sometimes put his hand in the dirt and act as if he was an outside defensive end. Does that sound like any position there is on West Virginia's defense, Mike? Sound familiar?
I think it's a bandit, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that opens up that opportunity. I know people are going to say, hey, Jared Bartlett's there. And Jared Bartlett has had like 3 games that were just like amazing, and you're like, holy cow, this guy. Problem is, it's been 3 games in like 3 years. And that is a position that you and I have talked about many a times, because the coaching staff has said the bandit early on when this staff got started, that the bandit was the key to this defense being successful. And they have gotten essentially nothing out of that position for like 45 of 48 games or something like that. And that's a testament to the coaching staff that they still had a good defense every year except this past season, with no impact at that spot. So I think it opens up a spot for a bandit, and maybe it gives you more leeway to keep pushing for that will, because that was a position, that will linebacker was one that both you and I were like, they got to find somebody. It wasn't something that a position that Neil Brown had talked about. It wasn't a position that they had really been offering guys at, but it might be now, or it might be one of these situations where one of the guys they're bringing in can push somebody else back over to will linebacker to help fill that void right now.
Okay, interesting. I would agree with that. And again, like if Tony Mathis does you a favor like that, not what you want to have happen, but you can certainly make it work there too. Let's summarize, Chris. There's a bunch of different ways to look at this, and I don't know, we can get into them all here too. But if you're applying headlines to spring portal season for West Virginia, not a lot of outs, a lot of ins, and then I don't know, backfill or depth fill or whatever, but they fortified positions and they filled needs, of course, too. I'm not sure they added like superstar quality players or starter quality players, maybe even, but they have fewer weaknesses now, and that's fine. They also did not take on weaknesses too. A small number of players. You're talking Caleb Coleman. I'm trying to think here. Jalen Shelton, Tony Mathis. But again, I think 4 people, and not great big names, or even though Mathis is a big name, not irreplaceable because he can be replaced by the roster. Minimal damage with, I would say, more impact on who they brought in. Accurate?
Very much so. I think they took their lumps in the winter for sure. Because you look at the spring, like since that first portal closed, and it was still open to add guys, and guys couldn't leave till recently. But yeah, there were 4 players who entered the portal in this second window. That's if I told West Virginia fans a month ago, here are the 4 players you're only gonna lose 4, and these are the 4 players you're gonna lose, I think everybody would have been okay with that. Like, again, there's no offense to these guys, but the way that guys have been transferring, you're kind of always preparing for the worst. And meanwhile, these guys are probably, other than Mathis, not going to make an instant impact this fall, even though they do have some upside for the future. So I think this was a positive second window for West Virginia. Let's put it that way.
Let me rewind for a minute, though. They lose JT Daniels, Caden Prather, Jordan Jefferson, Charles Woods. Probably your high profile from the winter, right? I'm not sure how much that stings.
Hey,
Is that weird?
no, because I think that's where the nuance comes in. I think
Yes.
I said something about with my snap recap, the ledger, where I was keeping track. It's like there has to be some nuance. You have to have some understanding of it, and I do it the ledger wise because I don't know the nuances of the other teams in the Big 12, and that's the point of that story, is to compare West Virginia to the rest of the Big 12. But like you said, I mean, you lost JT Daniels, and according to the ledger, that's several hundred snaps of a starting quarterback. But he wasn't the starting quarterback because he lost the job, and he looked pretty bad towards the end of his run there as the starting quarterback. Woods, he played 15 snaps before he got hurt. It was only okay as he tried to fight back from injury, and he fought back from it. I don't, fans still give him a hard time, but he fought back after ankle surgery to come back a month later, even though he then sat out the rest of the year so he could transfer.
Yeah, something
But
went bad there. Something went bad.
yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of odd that he would try so hard to come back and give this team what he could, and then just almost as quickly shut it down to just leave. But yeah, and then Prather again, the whole second half of the year, he was a virtual non-factor. And you're kind of running down the list like that. And maybe that brings me to my question for you, Mike. I'm gonna put you on a spot. What's the biggest loss out of the transfer portal? The biggest loss, let's say for this coming year, and if you want to add in beyond that, that's fine as well. Which one of those 18 players out
Hmm.
is the biggest loss?
Still think it's Prather, and only because I'm going on potential there. I just think that there's something there where he could have been like you could definitely see it. And if you give him parallel quality quarterback play, like quarterback play that's as good as him, he's going to be fine. I just thought he checked out of games last year because his quarterback didn't have it, or the team didn't have it, or whatever, and he needed something there too. That's one that just I look at and I go, oh man, you'd really like to be able to. If you make him the guy, I'm not saying you give him Kevin White stats, but if you put him in a Kevin White role where he's going to get targeted a bunch, I imagine he's going to take things very seriously and become a very good player. That's the one. But it's also hard for me to make that argument because I watched him last year and it just didn't seem like that it clicked for him. It doesn't mean it won't though. I just think that there's a lot of talent there and there's something to work with. That one just concerns me. And beyond that, like you'd really have to make an argument, like craft it, support it, sprinkle it with like decorations and shiny things to make people look at it and pay attention, but you'd have a hard time making a second one. I mean, and again, we haven't mentioned Jordan Jefferson, good player, but like I do think people like that and their contributions are replaceable by system um, as much as by a player. He never really dominated and popped off the page. You're like, oh my gosh, they have a Jordan Jefferson problem on the offensive line. There are moments like that too, but what's your favorite Jordan Jefferson game? You know,
Yeah.
that's tough for me to answer. So I think you can get out of that problem a little bit easier by the portal and maybe by just a combination of players as opposed to one. So it's a hard question to answer, and it's hard to submit Prather as an answer. Just to me, that feels like the right one.
I'm with you. And I think maybe that's a testament to because it feels crazy to say, because again, in that ledger, and it hasn't been updated for the losses during this second window and the gains during this second window. But in the last update, West Virginia was, one of the worst, most, however you want to phrase this, in the Big 12 and the country for snaps lost, starters lost, contributors lost. But again, you got to look at it through this lens, because we're sitting here talking about the biggest losses being a wide receiver who more or less cashed out for the second half of the season, or a defensive lineman that, again, maybe not a system knows kind of guy, but yeah, it's like when you're right. When name me the big game. Like I mentioned earlier, like Jared Bartlett, like while that bandit position needs some help, if you talk to me about Jared Bartlett, I go, ooh, Virginia Tech game a couple years ago. Like, ooh, this other game. Like, there's multiple games where it was like, hey, Jared Bartlett made a difference, a big difference. And you're asking me when was the Jordan Jefferson one? I'm like, well, he did do a decent job eating up some blockers every once in a while. And I don't want to, dog the interior defensive lineman here, because that is a very important part of their job. But that's where we're at. Is it Caden Prather? Is it Jordan Jefferson? Because a couple of these other guys, like Taj Alston, I mean, he was a guy that I don't think people even realized had another year of eligibility left. He was like a seventh year senior, and he lost his starting job. JT Daniels lost his starting job. Reese Smith is like technically, I guess, a starter, because he was that slot receiver, the fourth receiver, but they very rarely went to the four receiver look. So he's the quote unquote starter, but not really. Charles Woods, like all Big 12 corner, except that was 2 years ago, and he missed all of last season. So, okay. And Mike O'Laughlin missed 2 of the last 3 years. Okay. And that's just how you're going down the line here. Again, nuance that can't be put into just simple numbers.
Players coming in, not a long list yet. Didn't have to be a long list though, but we've already seen a number of them on the field during the spring. West Virginia fortunate to have the likes of Devin Carter, Deshaun Poe, Cole Taylor. I'm thinking out loud here right now too. Day Hawkins, Mobile was not here. He's on the roster though, so that confuses me sometimes. Montre Miller was here. Keyshawn Cobb was here. Kind of an abnormal number of players to be around in spring football, but that's the way this goes now too. They'll also welcome in Anthony Wilson, Beanie Bishop, and Tyron Bradley. Am I missing anybody there?
Jalen Ellis, wide receiver
Jalen
from
Ellis. Okay, yeah, that's
yeah.
another one too. So a good haul already in, and then some experienced players who, honestly, like they might have done spring football somewhere else. They might have had the spring off. They should be okay there too. But um, flipping your question back to you, Chris. Here, high profile, biggest addition. Which one? Which ones? Let's just go with the new group because we spent the spring talking about those other individuals in some capacity. But of the smaller number that I just mentioned there too, receivers, defensive backs, defensive end. Which one? Which ones do you like most?
I want to go with Beanie Bishop. I mean, he is a guy who had a lot of success at Western Kentucky. So he decided to move up a level. He transferred, decided to move up a level, went to Minnesota and was kind of that third corner, in the rotation. So he wasn't getting 600 snaps like your standard starting defensive player, but he got 300, 400 snaps. So he was out there enough that you could get a proper read of his skill set and a proper grade from Pro Football Focus, all that good stuff. And he found success there. He's looking for a 600 snap situation. So he ended up leaving Minnesota, coming to West Virginia now. And I don't want to say, there's still huge issues at cornerback, but Mike, I mean, for whenever they had it open and at the spring game, you got to see it. Like, is there a definitive, no doubt about it, starting pair of cornerbacks right now at West Virginia?
No.
Okay. So I think he is a guy who, based on his trajectory and what he's done so far, he has found success at Group of Five. He has found success as the third corner at a Power Five. Now it's time for him to kind of take that step. And if he can and be a full-time starter that is equally as successful, or like 90%, West Virginia gets a huge upgrade at cornerback.
I like it. Reps too. I mean, to go from Western Michigan to Minnesota, I think that awe factor about going from a group of five to a power five is gone. He should be able to cut it, I would think, in the Big 12. I'm going to go with Tyron Bradley, if that's all right with you, Chris. I like the leap from one year to another. And I think it happened maybe sooner than you would imagine, but maybe that just speaks to his potential or his gifts. But FCS level reminds me, I have a question for you on that. But picked up about 15 pounds between his first and second year. Still 6'4", 6'5". Looks like he's rangy, but he went from just 7 games, 9 tackles, 1/2 of 1 sack, to an every game starter, 11 games, 48 tackles, 10.5 tackles for a loss, 4 sacks. Played 600 something snaps after less than 100 the first year, and then gets after the quarterback. 6 or more pressures in a game 4 times, team high 42 pressures, team high 32 quarterback hurries. Listen, they just need that off the edge. Like, their defensive line is going to be at a deficit because they don't have Austin and Stills and Jefferson. Oh my gosh, didn't you say they weren't good? Never said they weren't good, and you don't have them anymore. So you're replacing contributions. And if you can get a guy who figured out a way in a short amount of time to get into the backfield, I think that's good. And again, the fact that he has 3 years to play 2 seasons, that's promising. I think that's a good addition for them. Leads me to
Mike,
this, Chris.
hold on. One
Go ahead.
question. I'll
Yes.
get a pop quiz for you.
Okay.
Who had the most pressures for West Virginia last season and how many? Off the top of your head, don't look. Because you just said 42 for Bradley, right?
Right.
What do you think the high number was for a West Virginia player last year?
A half.
30. Yeah. I mean, it was Stills. It was 30, and then I think the next one was like 20. So yeah, you're getting. It reminded me of it when we were talking about the Powell Ryland guy who I was looking into as he was coming up for his visit to West Virginia, and he had in 5 games. He only started 5 games, and he had 23 pressures, and I think it was 3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. And in just those 5 games as a starter alone, he would have ended up as like one of the top 2 or 3 in all 3 categories for West Virginia for the entire season. So I know people were thinking, Why do they keep targeting these defensive linemen, these pass rushers? That's why they need to get that up. Sorry, go ahead.
Is he going to get 32 and 42 this year? Probably not, but he's not going to play nearly as much either. And if he can consolidate the energy and the effort into a smaller number of snaps, he can be productive. I don't think that's an issue at all, too. Chris, a lower number of junior college, I would say targets, but certainly signees, right? And the junior college players are getting are kind of bounce back guys. Day Hawkins, for example. Excuse me, not Day Hawkins. Who's Keyshawn Cobb was started in junior college, went to Buffalo. That's not a bounce back, I guess, huh? My point
Yeah.
being, people who have junior college ties have been in the FBS at some point, it seems like. Not getting a lot of like 2 and 3 year guys from junior college, not just this year, this recruiting cycle, but recently, it seems like. However, Charles Woods, Wes McCormick, Jasir Cox, Marcus Floyd, Day Hawkins, Luke Hamilton, and now Abilene Christian. I was trying to think of Bradley's school's name. Sorry. All FCS guys here. I would say the competition, the routine or whatever, being a football player, more relevant than being a junior college player. It's less of a shock. I don't know. You don't have the Vans and cheese sandwiches, I guess, that Bob Huggins likes so much. But is there something to this FCS recruiting? And even if you look at Connor Neer, that's Division II. I wonder if this is a new thing, and it's not new because I mean Woods is a couple years ago, and we've seen the news for a couple years. But is this an investment, or is this just me mountain molehill, one of those things?
No, I think it's the move. I think this is essentially because of the transfer portal, and at least during these couple years where it's unlimited counters to try to get you back up to 85. I think this is the essentially replacement for junior college players. Again, for these 2 years, definitely. We'll see if it sticks moving forward once we get back to the cap, presumably. And I assume they're going to go back to capping off how many counters you can have each year. But you can go with the FCS route or the lower divisions route because you're getting a more consistent picture of what these players are. When you're playing in junior college, man, you're going to see a lot of bounce back guys. So you're going to see guys who are FBS kind of talents, but it's so inconsistent. One week they're playing against a team with 10 FBS players, and then the next week they're playing a bunch of kids who have a bunch of kids. There's no business being on that field. Or sometimes they're playing a game and the guy that they're lined up against is not one of those FBS guys, and you're basically just playing a glorified high school player. So it's pretty inconsistent in junior college of who you're going up against and what you're doing. And when you get to FCS, when you're doing smaller school stuff, it's not going to be FBS, but it's at least more of a picture of what you need to do and the routine that these players go through every single day for college football. So I think it's more, they adapt more easily to the FBS scene if they come from FCS or Division II rather than junior college.
All right. I had to quiz you on that because sometimes I get these theories in my head. Like a couple years ago, I noticed that they were getting transfers who had like a hidden year of eligibility, and I couldn't help but notice the pattern. And I got the courage up to ask about it one day, and Brown was like, yeah, cool. That's Keon Wakefield, though. What are you talking about? I was like, oh, so much for that. So in a much more intimate setting, I'll ask you questions like that from now on. So thank you for the validation. I appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
Closing time here, and we have not devoted a lot of, well, some ink, I guess, but words to him so far here. They added big time transfer safety. It's Anthony Wilson, a lot of tackles last year, a lot of snaps, but he's been productive for a couple of years. And I don't know where he goes in the defensive backfield, except that it was kind of a high priority for a number of schools. He waited till the end and he picks West Virginia. Who and what do they have here?
He's a guy that could play all sorts of spots. Because of the high number of snaps he played last year, it was over 900, which is just blowing my mind. Again, your standard starter is 600 to 700. So he is somebody who is capable of playing all three spots in that kind of safety room. I know Spears sometimes bounces between corner and safety depending on what year and who's involved, but he is a guy that has that versatility. And I don't want to pick on the two guys that are back there now, or even the three if we're going to include Spear, but I mentioned this on the board. In basketball, we seem to have come to the conclusion that you get the best players. You don't worry about who, your quote starter returning. If you think you can get an upgrade, you get an upgrade and let everything play out. And The same can be said for football. Like, if they're thinking he's a free safety, but they think he is an upgrade over what West Virginia has at free safety right now, even if it's a returning starter, do it. Like, sorry about your hurt feelings. This is big time college football. It's got to happen. So it could be one of those situations. It could be one of those depth situations. It could be something where they want to put him at spear and then move somebody from spear over to Will or whatever's going on. But I was told quite plainly he's a guy that could play all three spots for West Virginia.
This is something we're going to have to write about, I think, during the downtime. But the cross training they did at Cat and Free, that's curious to me. And like it doesn't seem like Spear and Will are necessarily the same anymore. I just don't know who's going to play where at linebacker, excuse me, at defensive back, because Cobb, Wilson, I mean, even to some extent, Burks is your free, but like those guys could probably play a number of positions. And I wonder they're just going to goof around and have like hybrid things and just have guys who can play different spots and tip off scouting reports much, much less frequently than before and be versatile, valuable players. But we got plenty of time to cover that. Not a lot of time or need left to talk here, Chris. Baseball coming up. More on portal decisions for players coming and going. We'll see. Maybe less of one than the other, but stay tuned. Windows closed. Action isn't over. Until then, I'm Mike Casazza.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
We will talk to you then.